Hey, Polly.
Hey, Greg.
Today we have the Village of Rhode Island on with us.
Okay. Who are
So
they?
they are going to be talking about foster, adoptive, grand, and kinship families, getting us all up to par on what great work they're doing.
All right. No idea what the village was going to be.
Yeah, see, there's many different villages if you punch it up on Google, but
Yeah.
this is the Village of Rhode Island, and we are going to be talking to Shannon Dos Santos. She's the executive director
Okay.
over there. She's going to be getting us up to date on all the great things that they have going on, all the new programs as well.
All right. I can't wait to hear about it.
All right. So without further ado, joining us today on Totally Preventable, we have Shannon Dos Santos, the executive director of the Village for Rhode Island Foster and Adoptive Families. Shannon, how are you doing today?
Doing okay, Greg and Polly. Thank you so much
Uh,
for having me on today.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. And to start off like we normally do with our guests, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I am a kinship adoptive parent myself. Started in the foster kinship and foster world in 2016 um, with a placement of three children, great nieces and great nephew. And from there, it's kind of evolved a little bit. I did need to step away from the school department so that I could care for our last two children that we received placement of that had some medical um, needs. But also, I was able to come on board with the village because of a grant that was proposed to us from BCYF, which would allow me to coordinate the support groups and all of our family events.
All right. Thank you.
That's great. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about the village and the approach to supporting families who want to open their homes to kids?
Absolutely. So I was first introduced to the village as well as part of my personal lived experience. Um, I didn't take advantage of the supports that they offered at that point because I think I was just in it and trying to go through it.
Mm.
Um, and then our second placement, I had heard of them already and thought, I shouldn't have to do this alone, and I don't have to do it alone. So at that point, I had taken advantage of what the village has to offer, and the village basically offers support groups, family events, workshops, a resource closet to any family that's affected by foster care or adoption. So we're foster and adoptive. Some groups in Rhode Island, they stop at that fostering piece. So when you've achieved permanency and gone on to adopt or guardianship, you're no longer able to use those services. So part of the mission of the village is to continue to support those families that have adopted, um, because the truth is it doesn't get any easier,
Mhm.
and we need the support.
And what type of support groups does the village offer?
Sure, the village currently offers 8 support groups for foster adoptive kinship families. Two of them are currently in person. One is a daytime kinship group at our Cranston location on the third Tuesday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., 11:30 a.m. Sorry. We also offer another in-person group in Northern Rhode Island in Pawtucket Public Library, currently on the third Wednesday of every month from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Those are our two in-person groups. And we have 6 virtual groups that run throughout the month, one specifically for grandparents in any kind of situation, informal, which means they're not involved with the department, formally involved in the department, any step of their journey currently, whether they're fostering, they've achieved adoption or guardianship. And then we have some other groups that are mixed for some are for kinship because we do realize that kinship families do have a unique component to their family, to that makeup, and it's difficult for them to you know make that work sometimes, the dynamics of that. And then there are other groups that have for a mixture of folks. We would never have someone not attend a group, so if they were unable to attend a kinship group and needed some support, they can feel free to go ahead and join any of our other groups.
So if a grandparent is listening that has any sort of custody of their grandchild, maybe even not legal custody, just as kind of stepping in, they can attend a meeting and see what it's all about?
Absolutely. We definitely welcome them. Part of the grant that we received recently from the Office of Healthy Aging, the purpose of that grant was to reach out to informal caregivers because they don't have the support and the resources often, or they're not aware of them. If you are involved in the department, oftentimes they will give you some information and some paperwork, which will kind of point you in the direction of where to get some support. But if you're an informal caregiver, you don't receive that. So, that was our goal and our mission as part of that project with the Office of Healthy Aging.
For our listeners, and I probably should have done this earlier, but for our listeners, can you just give us a breakdown of the difference between a kinship family and a grand family?
Absolutely. So a kinship caregiver is you have had a previous relationship somehow with the adult or child that is in care. It doesn't necessarily have to be family. It could be a teacher, a coach, um, definitely the aunt, uncle, grandparents we see most often, as a kinship care provider. In Rhode Island, they recognize fictive kin, which are non blood relatives of the child or adult in care as a kinship caregiver as well. So oftentimes, kinship caregivers are called and they could have a child in their home within 24 hours or less. Um, and traditional foster families have made that choice initially to take part in the training that the department offers, a 10-week class, generally 3 hours a week for 10 weeks. And you're setting yourself up to receive a placement at some point once you're finally licensed. So kinship caregivers, we say, it's generally on emergency basis, and you may or may not have an idea of what's going on with that family or to the extent of what's going on with that family, and you receive the phone call that then asks you, are you able to help this situation?
Right.
We saw that you emphasize reaching a wide range of diverse families. How do you meet those goals?
Yeah, so we are focusing more on outreach currently. And part of our plan has been to reach out to school departments in Rhode Island. They have direct access to the families that are involved or not involved with the department. So that has been our biggest avenue currently. We also have started to reach out to substance use and mental health agencies because those people that are in those programs often have children whose parent is taking care of them. So a third party kind of relation in that, hoping to reach out and provide the information to the family member who can then provide that information to the person caring for their child. We do know that that can be a difficult process depending on where that participant is in their recovery. But that has been one of our newer outreaches and our approaches as well. We do some work with the Heart Tree, who is a Spanish organization. They reach out to Spanish speaking families. And we do have two Spanish groups. Actually, I should have mentioned that as part of our programming. We have a group for Spanish speaking families for traditional foster parents and a group for kinship Spanish speaking families as well. So I think through all of those avenues, we're able to really reach a diverse group of people. We do have a singles resource group as well, of all ages and all, backgrounds, because, being single also has a different component to it. You may be dating, but you're also a single foster parent taking care of children. And that brings a different level to your experience than to others.
Never thought about that. Yeah. I guess that does happen.
Right?
Ta-da, the epiphany. Now, in your title, it states foster and adoptive families. What types of resources and support do you offer to foster and adoptive families?
Sure. So our main component of resources that we offer to these families is the peer support that we offer through our support groups. That really does make the village, sets the village apart from other organizations, which, they have that clinical component, which is very much needed, or that, component that doesn't quite allow you to get that peer support in with them. So definitely peer support through support groups, as well as invitations to all of our family events, which allows a place for families and children to come together to realize that they are not alone, that every person in the room with them is in or has been in the same situation, different, level or different, background or history, but the ultimate, foundation has been there for everyone in that room, which really makes them feel comfortable, causes them to kind of open up a little bit. One of the stories I like to tell related to our family events is the first time that we had met a grandparent was a couple of years ago at our fall festival at McCall YMCA in Lincoln. We hadn't seen her before, which caught our eye. And then we also noticed that she had an older, maybe 4-year-old at that point, and an infant. She just seemed a little overwhelmed. And I think as a caregiver, sometimes you can just recognize that in others. She didn't say anything, but we could just see, and she could have been handling the situation well, but we knew she was there. She hadn't been there before. So we reached out to her. We started a conversation. We found out a little bit more about her situation, and realized that, she really needed the support of the people that we have in our groups, invited her to other events, invited her to support groups. And I'm happy to say that today we have seen her family. They attend almost all of our events. She comes to our in-person support groups. And we've been able to work with her and help her just not feel alone, give her a safe place to talk about her situation, what's going on, what the updates are. So that is part of how we reach out to our families. We do have some private Facebook groups for kinship families. That's a separate one. And a regular Facebook group that's also private because we want families to feel like they can share anything that they need to share in a safe place. We verify there's a couple of questions that you'd have to answer before getting into that group. We just want to make sure that the people that are joining are active or have adopted or achieved permanency, and that, it's safe for everyone to share. So we ask that everyone keeps the information that's shared there confidential. It's an online platform so that if you're having a bad day at 2 a.m., you can go on there and vent a little bit and say what you need to say. And likely someone else is awake and you could connect with them that way. And we also more recently have some assistance that we are offering to kinship caregivers over the age of 55 for rental assistance or housing support and rental assistance. So if you're a kinship caregiver over the age of 55 in Rhode Island and you have placement of a child under the age of 18, you could have recently received that placement and you've kind of maybe have tapped into your rent for the upcoming month to get that child or children, because oftentimes with kinship placements, it is more than one child. You could, you needed to get them what they needed. The village does offer a supply closet where you can get diapers, wipes, clothing, but sometimes families don't know about that resource quite yet. Right. So if you're tapping into your own funds and you're now behind on rent, we do have the ability to help get you caught up and potentially even sustain another month for you so that you can kind of, take a step back and relax, focus on your family and what you have in front of you.
Mhm.
And we can talk about that a little more in detail later on as well.
That's an awesome program.
It is. Because can you imagine all of a sudden having to feed extra mouths, clothe extra people, especially if you're on a pretty tight budget already?
Rip.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what happens with our older caregivers. They're on a budget, they're
Mhm.
on a fixed income. Now they're trying to fit, one, two, or three children into a smaller home, likely.
Mhm.
How is that going to work? What about beds? What about furniture? The kids need clothing. How am I going to get the food that they need? So all of that is a reality. Some families, they'll tell this story that I said, yes, of course I would help. And then I thought, oh no, where am I going to put these kids?
Right.
Right? Like, so your first reaction is absolutely, I want to help. And now you figure it all out afterwards.
Mhm. What kind of challenges do you see connecting children with families?
Yeah, so the department really tries to match children with the proper family. It could be a family that has expressed interest in a child of a certain age, of a certain sex. Um, for some families, it might be easier to have a child that is not in school yet because of their schedule. Some families like teenagers. That can be challenging in itself, right? Because they don't want to go through the younger stages of things, the diapers, the formula, so every family kind of has their own, interest, and the department does keep track of that. What we've tried to do is that, we try to have families keep an open mind because what you may think you want today, they may not be available currently, right? But if you are open to receiving a call, oftentimes families say yes to, even if that child was not on their scope, um,
Mhm.
you know, and some families also come into it for adoption purposes. And, we try to also keep an open mind that sometimes that doesn't always happen because the purpose of foster care is to hopefully and safely reunite that child with their biological family.
Mhm.
If that is not able to happen, then we do have families that are ready for that adoption process as well.
And can you foster if you have children of your own?
You can, absolutely. So the fostering licensing process is a little bit different for traditional families versus kinship families, because again, kinship families are often receiving a placement as an emergency placement.
Mhm.
Um, but I had three children at the time when we received our first placement. Um, and three others came into the home. So we had six at one point. Then one of our other daughters moved back home, which made it seven. So you definitely can. You also we encourage families to talk to their children about what is that going to what could that look like? What is your input? Do you see us, maybe having a little boy in our house or an older girl, or, to get that family view and that input really does help a placement, stay a little bit longer, or just makes it a little bit easier of a transition for everyone once you've had those conversations.
Now, given the complexities of the foster care system, how does the village collaborate with other organizations?
Yeah, so the village, part of our Facebook groups as well, we share our information with other agencies, and they are often very happy to share our monthly information with their families. They post it online or they may send it out in an email chain. And same goes for them. When they have a workshop or something available that they're running, they will share it with us and we will put that on our platforms and social media so that, I think that each organization has their own strengths and their own, the things that they're really good at. So in my mind, we should be building off of that and grabbing those pieces from each individual organization so that we can wrap around these families and get them all of the needs and the supports that they have.
Mm.
Um, we recently received an invitation for a workshop for toilet training. So we'll put that out there to families. Any family that's in that boat currently or needs some extra guidance or help or tips, they will join that workshop. They will deal directly with, Ripen and get that on their schedule.
How do you help families with emotional and psychological challenges? Before we signed on, Greg and I were talking about families we know that have had foster kids and how difficult it must be when you get so attached and as happy as you are for them, um, it just must rip your heart out.
I'm sure, absolutely. We have definitely had, families have had that experience. Again, like we said, the goal of the foster care system is to reunify children with their families if it's safe,
Mhm.
right? So, what helped me and what I like to share with families is that I will care for this child for as long as they are in my care.
Mm.
So that as long has so many different, meanings. It could be a couple of weeks, it could be a few months, it could be a few years. Um, the court system really does try to give families the opportunity to reunify with their children. They do know that that is the best place for children to be raised in. That is where they feel comfortable. That is where they have that attachment often. Um, and, we've also seen some really good things happen from some reunifications, which are nice.
Mhm.
When reunification is not an option or takes a little bit longer, that's where we come in and we really try to just make sure that we're available and meeting the needs of the child for as long as they're in our care.
Mhm.
But absolutely heartbreaking stories, some, difficulty for the biological children for when the foster child goes back.
Mm.
They've also built that connection and that attachment to that child now too.
Mhm.
But having those conversations, in the beginning, hopefully with your family, that we don't know how long this is going to be. It could be short term, depending on what the situation is in the family. It could be longer because they have some things that they need to complete. Um, we don't always know the details of each individual case because that is confidential. But based on some hints or some things that are able to be shared, you may have a good timeline or a sense of how long it could be.
Mhm. Must be
So,
difficult for the foster kids too. I mean, you've found a nice, safe place that you feel comfortable with, and there's a lot of uncertainty going back. And even though you like love your family, it's very turbulent.
absolutely, absolutely. And we do, that's why I think the peer support of what the village does is so important because, often when you don't feel alone or when you have a group that you can belong to or share things with, I just that in itself just takes a whole, the pressure off of you. And when you're around other people that have experienced that same event or that same experience as you, it just is a little bit more comforting.
Mhm.
Now, when, like you mentioned, kinship families and they're receiving a child at almost an emergency's notice, what are some first steps that the receiving family should think about, whether it be, legal options that they have, or what are a few first steps that people should?
Sure. Definitely depends on the age of the child, right? So we definitely want to make sure that the home is safe and appropriate for the child. Um, Trying to figure out where you're going to put that child. Is that child going to now be, in the living room until I can get a bedroom, or an extra room cleared out and cleaned up? Or for the younger child, it could be making sure that you have an age appropriate car seat that is not expired. So if we're giving a car seat away to a family, we're hoping that others families will give it to us that is not been in an accident, not expired, in good condition. For kinship families, the department is able to offer help with car seats and a bed or a crib if needed. That may take a little bit longer. So by being involved or knowing of resources like the village, we may be able to get that to them a little bit faster than the department who now needs to order that and then have that shipped and delivered to the family.
Mhm.
So, thinking about schooling as well, depending on the age of the child, how are you going to get that child to school? Most likely, you will need to be driving them to or from where their home school is. Are you able to do that? How does that work with your work schedule? Trying to figure all of those pieces out. And then, the truth is that children often do come into care with a bag of clothing. Um, duffel bags are the new thing right now where, different organizations will donate duffel bags to foster children because they have seen those black trash bags have some, of their clothing and their belongings in it. Sometimes that clothing doesn't fit. Sometimes that clothing is, you know, really dirty or they're unable to wear it, or maybe it's a trigger for a child and they just can't right now wear what's in that bag. Um, so just knowing where to get some clothing, the department can help with some clothing vouchers and things for the child in care, but being hooked up with Foster Forward, another great organization in the community, which is a storefront that you're able to shop free at. There's no cost to families, just the blue form that the child is placed with you in. They have clothing, also, baby equipment, similar to what the village has, but they are larger and they have more space. So I would say tangible resources, as well as the village does offer emergency placement resources in the form of a gift card. So if we don't have what the family needs, oftentimes we're able to give them a gift card for them to get what they need to get them through currently, right? If we don't have the right size diapers or wipes, or if we don't have the right size clothing or a car seat. Um, so just thinking about those immediate needs first. Um, and again, like I said, most often kinship families are saying, oh, yes, I'll do it. And then you're thinking, oh, no, now what?
Mm.
What do I need to make this successful?
Right.
If someone is considering being a foster parent, what would be the most important message you would want to get to them?
I would say being a foster parent has its highs and lows. And if you're willing to meet the child where they're at, or the family where they're at, and have an open mindset to the situation, I think that could definitely help um, that a particular placement or what have you at the time. Um, Not having some preconceived notions of what that might look like. The village recently collaborates with the department when they're doing their tips map training for traditional foster parents. They have a parent panel as part of their tips map training where they all come together. They share some food. They meet in person because a lot of those classes are virtual as well. And the village, we usually have it at the village, and I'll come in and just share some resources about the village. So we're trying to set them up for success right from the beginning and share some information with them. We have some peer mentors available that are, subcontracted through the department. They have some mentees that have some probably similar stories or situations that they may be able to share. Any questions that we're able to answer for them. So I think making sure that they don't, one size doesn't fit all, right? So having that open mind, parents, we think about the parents and what are they going through currently? They just lost their child. I mean, what does that feel like for them?
Mm-hmm.
and what are the next steps for them. Um, so, and telling the families also that reunification is always the goal until it isn't anymore.
So you can officially call me Mr. Afterthought because I always will think of something after. Going back to the rental assistance program, is it only if you're a renter? Does it help if you have a mortgage?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg, because we did also think about that initially.
Mhm.
But we find that a lot of families are in a rental situation that may need that help more so. And because we're trying to provide that stability or that sustain their living situation, oftentimes they're not in a home that they have purchased or that they're in a mortgage with. We did talk to the Office of Healthy Aging about that because that was also a question of ours.
Mm.
And because there is so much we want to be responsible, right? So they're accountable. Um, we also need to be responsible in making sure that the information that we're receiving from families is correct as best as we can without being too invasive of their privacy,
Mm.
but being responsible of, this gift that we are able to give to them, um, which can help them sustain. So it is currently only for people that are renting.
Mm.
I'm not sure if, down the line something might come up or might be available to others, but what we deal with right now is currently just for those that are renting.
All right.
Yeah. And it could provide a family up to $4,000 of rental assistance. It could be a back rent and then a month's rent to help them, sustain their living situation. It could be if they're needing to relocate because they have a placement and they need a bigger place. It could be a security deposit and a first month's rent. So it really is a case by case basis, depending on what those needs of the family are, that we're able to help with at that time.
And what is the process?
Sure. So we have an application that will need to be filled out by that family. It's pretty simple, but we will ask them for their name, their current place that they're renting, their birth date, um, the landlord's information, so that we can verify on our end. If the department is involved with that situation, we will ask them just to verify, is the family involved with the department? Um, yes or no? Are they, maybe they've achieved permanency? What does that look like if the family was involved, achieved permanency, 5 months ago, or just so that there's another set of eyes on it and it goes through another state agency. So we will likely get the information out to that family. It will come back to me. We will forward it to the DCYF for their eyes and their input on that family. If it's an informal caregiver that has no involvement in the department, I will need to, do a little bit of further work in that, calling the landlord, making sure that the information is accurate, getting the total number that is on the application, that total dollar amount, make sure that matches, make sure that the information on the application for the landlord matches up. Where does that check need to be sent to? Um, I did have one family that had just a wrong number
Mm.
of the address, the street address of the landlord. In this particular situation, it was an agency, like a management company. So I just thought to myself, let me just double check on this. It was one of our first ones, so I was learning the whole process and what does that look like. So, oh, that address is different from this. Let me confirm which is correct
Mm.
to make sure that it's going to the proper spot. Make sure that they're aware of who the family is and what the purpose of those funds are. Sending that out after the final approval is done with a letter just that states this is for so and so at this address for September and October's rent or for back rent. Um, so really wanting to cross our I's and dot our T's and make sure that everyone is on the same page from the village to the department, to the Office of Healthy Aging, because the Office of Healthy Aging will be the final sign off on that, and then kicking it back to us so that those funds can be sent out.
All right. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's great.
You're welcome.
Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you wanted us to know?
Sure. I did make some notes on my end, and because I
Okay.
wanted to make sure that we're talking about some of the most important things here. There's so much involved. And we do feel like a lot of the challenges and the issues that our families face are totally preventable by having the support of the agencies that are involved, like the village. You know, I don't want to leave any other agencies out because there are so many that do such great work. But challenges that, we often see, we just want families to know that they are not alone, that, more likely than not, there is a family that is in our circle that has experienced similar circumstances. We don't want to say the same because, that feels different to everyone, you know? A lot of our older caregivers, you're talking about their son or their daughter that is having an issue currently that is the reason why they have their grandchild. That is hard to talk about. What is that issue? Is that substance abuse? Is that a mental health issue? Is that homelessness? So just making sure that they feel comfortable. Sometimes, they just kind of come and hang out for a little bit, and then, they observe and see what that's like. And before long, they are sharing because now they're comfortable. We really try to give each family some time of their own to share what's happening with them. Some of our support groups have developed how was your month on a scale from 1 to 10, and then, those that have that 8 or 9 higher number where it was more difficult, make sure that we get to them first to make sure that they share if they're comfortable and they want to, where the family, it also teaches the families that are there also, if they're a 1 or a 2 and they've had a better month, I'm okay to sit back and listen this month because I'm sure at one point they have been up to that higher 8 or 9 and they had the opportunity to share what they needed to share.
All right. And for those that are listening, how would they get in contact with the village?
Sure. So you can reach out to us on our website to get some more information, and that is rivillage.org. Those that are actively fostering or have had a permanency situation can also check out our Facebook pages. We do have a public Facebook page, which is the Village for Rhode Island Foster and Adoptive Families. So that is for anyone that might be interested in learning more about the village and what we have going on. And then we have those 2 private Facebook pages, the Village Support Group and Village RI Kinship Support Group. So wanting to just make that distinction because, again, those kinship families often have a different dynamic. So giving them that space that they need to feel comfortable. They may join both, as well. But so those are ways that they could reach us. They could also email admin@rivillage.org. I will get those messages and get back to them. And then they can give us a call at 401-481-5483 if they'd like to reach out and leave a message.
That's great. Thank you so much, Shannon, for your time. We greatly appreciate you and all the work that the village is doing.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We definitely appreciate it.
All right. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. You as well.
Thanks. Bye-bye.